Okay, everybody, so hi and welcome back to yet another episode of Faith and Other Insights. I'm Faith Brunel, and here we have Mark today. Hi, Mark, how are you?
Good afternoon, Fate. I'm very well, thank you.
Wonderful. So, everyone, you might notice that I'm wearing the same clothes as last week's episode because I'm actually recording Megan. I recorded Megan and Mark's episode on the same day within half an hour of each other. So, busy day. So no, it's not a glitch. I am literally recording it in the same place with the same outfit. So let's move on. So Mark, thank you for agreeing to share your wonderful story and give some insights really onto your barrister journey on Faith and Other Insights today. Because what we like to do is talk about the person's journey, because I found that it really inspires the listeners to kind of carry on with what they're doing as well and understand that it's not an event, it's a journey, and so there has to be that progress and development day by day and kind of hour by hour in their lives to get to the next point. So I want to ask you, because you are a barrister and you specialize in public planning, licensing, and environmental law, what inspired you to pursue this field of law, and what do you find the most kind of engaging and about this field of law?
Yes, well, I suppose those two answers are in many ways interlinked because the
Mm,
reasons why I find it very fulfilling are the reasons why I thought I'd like this area of law. But
mm,
thinking about planning law in particular, what really interests me and what I find quite fun on a day-to-day basis is, unlike other areas of law and other areas of litigation, it's very forward-looking. So most of my time is spent looking at developments that may or may not happen in the future. I mean, that could be a housing development, that could be an airport, it could be rail, it could be any sort of infrastructure or commercial development, etc. So a lot of that is creative thinking, it's forward-looking, it's about the way in which the world around us is going to look as a result of decisions made in part of the planning process. And it means I get to work with a wide variety of people, so architects, design
mm,
specialists, engineers, etc., about how this project's actually going to work. So that's quite fun. In respect to public law,
mm,
I'm very interested in current affairs and politics and in the world around us. And a lot of my public law practice interlinks with what goes on in the political process, what is day-to-day news very often, etc. So that's quite fun. In respect of environmental law, I had studied international environmental law
mm,
at Cambridge as part of my LLM. So again, I was interested in data, in thinking about the world around us, but also, of course, the interlink with planning law, because both of those areas of law are concerned really
mm.
about the way in which we use land. And in respect of licensing, again, this is because I'm interested in the way in which we use land and resources. But of course, licensing is about the way in which we use those buildings. It's quite fun, it's diverse. So I've worked
Mhm.
in cases for nightclubs, restaurants, bars, etc.
Wow,
And
a
also
range.
something like
Mhm.
exactly a wide range. So it's a very diverse. So those are the reasons why I was attracted to this area of practice. And I've certainly found that to be fun and to be true.
Well, thank you, Mark. Actually, that sounds really interesting for myself. And to be honest, if I hadn't already decided to specialize in international law, that would have definitely persuaded me. Because I did attend an open evening whilst I live in London at Landmark Chambers, and then they were talking about their sets, and it sounded really interesting about planning, etc. So thank you, really, and I'm sure that there are listeners here that are definitely interested in that type of law. And actually, I can definitely kind of talk about, and I understand what you were saying. I can relate and resonate with your thoughts around politics because I've just graduated with a bachelor's in politics, and I like to be well informed of what's going on. And I think that having a degree in politics and being aware of it actually will help me to shape the barrister I will become, because it will allow me to look at issues from different perspectives and be more well-rounded. So thank you for sharing that as well. And as you said, really a diverse range of clientele, because you've got airports, you've got working with architects at nightclubs. So really, this is something that's never going to be boring because there's always so much to
Absolutely.
do.
I've never had a day that's boring. And as you say, my clients are developers, they're local planning authorities, it's central government, it's local government, it's
Wow.
individuals and one-off projects, it's
Mm.
nightclub owners, it's the Metropolitan Police. So anybody and everybody. My list of clients is very, very diverse and very interesting.
I can imagine, and I also know that I also know that in terms of when we were talking about the episode, you're really busy, aren't you? Because to all the listeners, when I was trying to book Mark in for this interview, he was at court, so he's really, really on top of this thing. So thank you for sparing some time for us today, just to get stuck into your amazing journey.
And I would say actually, and in terms of listeners who are thinking, is this an area of law that I'm interested in? I
Mm,
mean, as you have picked up on, I go to court quite a lot, and I'm
mm,
lucky to have a very court-based practice,
mm,
and also other tribunals, so be that planning inquiries or be that licensing subcommittees of local
mm,
authorities. So that means I'm on my feet quite a lot, which I enjoy. So if you're a person who's interested in advocacy and
mm,
wants to be at the bar because you want to be an advocate, and unfortunately, I think some other areas of law, like commercial litigation,
mm,
straight commercial law may not offer the same opportunities for advocacy and
mm.
also for dealing with expert witnesses and witnesses in terms of cross-examination and public forums that planning law does allow you to do. So if you're interested in advocacy, this is definitely an area of law.
Well, thank you for that, Mark. I think that's a very important point to make, a key distinction, a key distinction, because as you mentioned, if you're happy to be kind of moving around, then this is for you. If not, then obviously you might want to do another type of law, another set. So thank you for making that distinction so that people are well informed when making their decision as to which type of law they want to specialize in. And actually, I want to go back to something that you said at the outset of our conversation. You were talking about how you studied for your LLM at Cambridge. I just wanted to ask, I know this isn't a question that I've given you, but I'm really interested to know, is there any tips you'd give to aspiring legal professionals in terms of how to do well at university? Because you did very well, so congratulations. And kind of like how they can kind of navigate the legal sphere, because it's very competitive.
It is very competitive, and I suppose what the key point is, I think probably pure academic potential, because that's what we look for in
Mm,
terms of pupillage, is no longer, or if it ever was indeed,
mm,
enough. You have to sort of show that you're a well-rounded person. But in
yeah,
terms of showing academic achievement, in addition to your grades, that is things like writing articles for publications,
mm,
etc. So that's something that I did, and
right.
also about sort of the extracurriculars. And I think if you're interested in the bar, I mean, you should really be taking all the advantages of the university of routine debating, public speaking,
Mm,
etc., and then also using your summers wisely. Of course, you're at university, you need to go off and travel and, go to music festivals and all those sort of things. Of course you do. But, you really ought to sort of be thinking about what future career. It's not enough on the day of graduation to think about what am I going to do now. So use your summers to take opportunities for work experience. So in terms of my journey, I
mm,
did summer internships at or vacation schemes, as they're called, at large international commercial law firms, including
mm,
in the city. And I also completed various mini pupilages so that I could make an informed decision
yeah.
about pursuing the bar. So those are the sort of tips I'd say. So, get involved, but also it's important to show that you have interests outside of the law as well, or whatever your undergraduate degree was. So
Mm,
that may be sporting, that may be music, that may be other areas of clubs and societies, and maybe political organizations, etc. So showing A, firstly, you're an interesting person, B, that you're engaged, and then also C, that you have the ability to multiply and challenge yourself by getting involved in lots of different activities and balancing all of those.
well, that's wonderful, Mark. And everybody, well, you've heard it here from Mark, a really esteemed barrister. That if you want to do well, like he has, you have to basically. Everyone, I would suggest that you just rewind that, get those tips down, and start to enact them. Because you made an excellent point. Planning prevents poor performance, as my dad would always say. You can't just graduate and then say, "Okay, what's next?" And it's okay to not know now, but you have to have something in the works. And
Yes.
I think one point that I really like, I think that's important, that you did a range of training contracts, which is what you need to do to become a solicitor. But on the flip side, you also do mini pupilages to make an informed decision, which was the word you used. And that's what I do. I always attend law firm open days, law firm open days, because I'm still interested, because as a barrister, you will work with solicitors. So as you said, in terms of the chambers that you're at, what kind of made this chamber stand out for you? Why did you choose this chamber over the other chambers?
Yes, there's a number of reasons for that. Firstly, they allowed me to build a broad practice. So you've
Mm,
touched on the diverse range of clients and areas of law that I do. So that
yeah.
was an introduction of Francis Taylor Building. Also, I like the fact that they're very esteemed in terms of our reputation. So not to talk ourselves up, but we like to think good of what we do, and that lots of very good clients come to us. So I
Mm,
knew that I was going to get really high quality work,
yeah.
and also opportunity to work with more senior members of
Mm,
chambers, which I do quite regularly, and which is really going to help me and has helped me to develop as a barrister. I also quite like the culture as well.
mm,
So it's evident to me from my interactions that FTB was a friendly place, is a place where people got on. And also we like to sort of think that we have a sort of a family atmosphere in Chambers, that people do look out for each other. There's always an open door. For instance, I had a tricky point last week and I was able to pick up the phone and ring a very senior member of Chambers and discuss that with him. So that's not something that's evident in every Chambers. So that was why I was attracted to FTB and why I would encourage those of you who are thinking about applying to us for people to very much do so.
Well, thank you, Mark, for that. That's a really in-depth overview. And you know, for myself, an aspiring barrister, I'm definitely taking notes today as well for myself, going forward for my future career. So thank you very much. I know that these questions are not scripted, but there's just so much that you've done that I'm just so interested in. I know that your listeners will take great value. But while you were talking to me, whilst listening, I was simultaneously looking at your profile on LinkedIn. Again, everybody would say that, you know, LinkedIn is really important for networking. But my question is, I looked at your undergraduate degree, how you did a BCL law with history and you got a first class, which is excellent. I wanted to talk to you how you were the winner of the National Moot Court 2018 and other moot courts as well. Could you talk to us about the importance of actually having, you know, as you mentioned before, hands-on work experience in the field you want to do, and kind of how did you kind of prepare for these and win eventually as well?
God, that's a blast from the past. Meeting, yes. So in terms of those are really excellent competitions to get involved in. So the National Mooting Competition is the most prestigious mooting competition in Ireland.
Wow.
The final of which was judged by a Supreme Court judge, and also we had a High Court judge as well. So what that allowed me to do was to demonstrate when I came to pupillage, well, actually, I have tried this out.
Yeah.
I quite like it, I enjoy it, and I've demonstrated success, and I've appeared before a Supreme Court justice or a High Court justice, etc. And it's really important to do that because it shows that you know what being a barrister involves. And in terms of how one succeeded in those, I mean, that's a question I don't quite know how I managed. But I think in terms of how one went around preparing, it's very much how I like to prepare for court today. And that's in terms of research. I mean, there's a saying that, you know, cases are won in chambers, not in court. It's about the preparation that you do, and it's also about the way in which you present your case. So I enjoy advocacy, I enjoy being in court, and I like to think that sort of makes the case in which I have to present not enjoyable, perhaps not quite the right word, but persuasive.
Very insightful, Mark. Honestly, thank you. I can really feel the passion from there. I can really feel the passion virtually, so to speak. I just wanted to ask you another question though about kind of attaining a first class honours. How did you actually kind of manage to obviously to get a first class while still being so engaged and open to different opportunities of work experience and mooting, etc.?
I think again, and also it helped me show in interviews time management, etc.,
Right.
and the ability to prioritize, which is very important in practice. And I think that was, I mean, how I went about doing that was just being very careful of my time, in the way in which I planned my revision, my study, etc., to fit in all those other activities. So it was certainly, you know, was a challenge, but it was a useful one because I developed my time management skills early on, and that's something that has stuck to me in practice. Because on any given day, you know, you will be dealing with multiple cases, with multiple clients, multiple solicitors, all of whom are not going to know about all of your other demands and very often can't because of confidentiality reasons. So you have to learn how to manage your time efficiently and effectively, and also, you know, work hard as well, which is an inevitable part of succeeding in academia or in any job or any area of practice.
Very interesting, Mark. Thank you. I just want to segue into your kind of current career now as a barrister. Could you share an interesting or challenging case that you've worked on that really stands out in your career and kind of explain how it made an impact?
Yes, well, I'm going to be difficult. I'm going to mention two cases. Barristers like to be difficult and to do things our own way. The first case of which is actually made up of two cases, and that related to injunctions, and the purpose of which was in the context of the increased demand for asylum seeker accommodation in the UK, and the government had made a decision to use hotels across the country for asylum seeker accommodation, which is very obviously covered quite heavily in the media, as you will be aware. And I was instructed in two different cases, both as junior counsel. One involved a hotel in Cambridgeshire last year. The other one involved a hotel in Wales earlier this year. And why that was interesting, well, we were operating in the face of public interest of extensive media coverage, etc., and also political pressure. I mean, we were challenging effectively the decision of the Home Secretary as to how to deal with this crisis. So that was interesting and topical. And in terms of how it made an impact, well, it allowed the courts the opportunity to engage with, as I say, that crossover between planning and politics. So we had to demonstrate, for instance, whether or not it was arguable that using a hotel as an asylum seeker accommodation was a material change of use for planning purposes. So that was obviously interesting. But also the court had to, in terms of the balance of convenience, weigh up the interference that if we had succeeded, that would have had with the Home Secretary's plans and policies.
Yeah.
So that was interesting and challenging, and it made an impact because the law, to some extent, was it was clarified in a couple of the judgments that were handed down by the High Court. So that was useful. And actually, out of that, I built quite a strong practice in injunctions in other planning contexts. And the second case I was going to talk about is a very recent case at the High Court, which is Dawes and the Secretary of State for Transport. And I was junior counsel for the Secretary of State for Transport. And that's actually quite an interesting point. As a public law practitioner, I often act for the government. I often act against government. So that it's interesting sometimes how often the Home Secretary has been my client and I have acted against the Home Secretary in other cases. And that's the wonder of the independent bar. But in respect to that case, that concerned the decision to grant development consent for the reopening and redevelopment of Manston Airport in Kent for freight purposes. And that was interesting because it is a development consent order. The procedure, which is quite interesting, involves significant infrastructure. So when you think about nuclear power, rail, airports, you were thinking about development consent orders or water projects, etc. And this case made an impact because we engaged with some of the procedural rules, etc. And the law, to some extent, was clarified by the High Court. It was also very interesting because the grounds of which related to the aid and need for a new airport for freight purposes and then also to climate change. So a lot of the claimant's case was advanced on the basis of climate change.
Right.
That was quite interesting. So that sort of gives you a feel for some of the cases that I made.
They're really interesting. Like, I'm not sure if you noticed, I've just glued to what you were saying. I was so I'm so engrossed, honestly.
If only judges had the same reaction.
Honestly, really interesting, Mark. Thank you. And just finally, really, what are some key legal issues or trends in public environment and environmental law that you believe will shape the legal landscape in the near future?
Yes, well, I suppose the extent to which climate change is becoming involved in planning cases and public law cases is increasing. So a lot of cases now involving judicial review will involve some element of climate change grounds. So for instance, the Dawes case is a good example. There's lots of other cases, etc. So I think that's going to be an emerging and further developing trend. We saw it already to a certain extent. So I think climate change litigation is going to be really interesting, and the way in which government responds to climate change is obviously a matter of some interest. In respect to planning law, I think there's a lot of, at the moment, I mean, we're all aware that we need more homes, we need more places for people to live. So there's obviously a need for the planning system to accommodate that. And I think it's quite interesting at the moment, the way in which the government is attempting to reform the planning system. I mean, governments always try to reform the planning system and say we need to make it quicker and more speedier, and the extent to which there are issues in the planning process is always a matter of some debate. But the government is certainly making changes, and you would have seen, for instance, that the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act was recently received royal assent from the King following the bill earlier this year. And that's quite interesting in terms of reforms to the way in which housing and infrastructure is going to be developed. So that's going to be something that's going to need us to consider and to respond to. And those are some of the trends, I think. I mean, planning, as I say, is always interlinked with politics. So the potential change of government following the new general election will also bring with it challenges as to the way in which a new government may want to prioritise certain projects. I mean, you've seen recently, for instance, the political, I won't quite use the word debacle, over High Speed 2. and de-scrapping, or the decision not to proceed with the second stage of High Speed 2. So again, you see the extent to which politics and planning, and also, I mean, I do a lot of compensation work following compulsory purchase. And so obviously responding to any large infrastructure project has an impact on businesses and individuals who live along the route, etc. So it will be interesting to see what happens now in the fallout of High Speed 2 not proceeding, and what other infrastructure projects may raise similar issues.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, because it's been a very, very engaging and interesting podcast episode just to hear about your experiences as well. You are very well read and knowledgeable about planning and public law as well. And actually, to be honest, I'm sure the listeners would have really taken away a lot of notes today in their notebooks or on their phones or however they take notes today, just really becoming immersed in public and environmental law, in your journey as well. So I just really want to congratulate you once again for where you are. You're really making such an impact, and hearing about the range of bills as well, the range of kind of planning and projects that you're working on is really, really engaging. It's really interesting to listen to as well as an aspiring barrister, because really giving an insight into kind of insight into your work, into your daily life. So, and I'm sure the listeners, because I find that a lot of the listeners are actually legally focused. So hopefully this will help them to make their decision in terms of what type of law they want to do. But just finally then, how can the listeners get in touch with you after the show today?
Yes, well, I mean, you mentioned LinkedIn earlier, and I think it's important to say I'm a great user of LinkedIn. I'm a great fan of LinkedIn. So certainly I'm very happy for people to connect with me on LinkedIn and to send me a message, etc. And I'm always very active on LinkedIn. So that probably is the best way. I'm also active on Twitter. So again, very happy for people to follow and to interact on Twitter.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Mark, first of all. And thank you to all my listeners for tuning in once again. This is your host, Faith Brunel. I'm signing off. And remember, it's not an event, it's a journey. Your journey can begin now. Bye-bye.